Good afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network, and welcome to the Chatt Up Show, the show where we chat about any and everything to do with popular culture. I'm your host, Elizabeth Lloydie, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Remember, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen live 24/7 at www.gbkm.fm. You can watch, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV. You can follow us on Insta at GBKM FM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. Now, welcome back to another week of the Chatt Up Show. Feels good. And got some good news for us here in Ontario. We are seeing the lowest numbers of new COVID cases since March. Okay? Since March. With only 33 new reported cases and 0 new COVID-related deaths. 680 News reports that 91% of cases are resolved, and testing is up to over 21,500 tests conducted as of yesterday. There's some great news for us over in this province right here. It's looking really good, and especially following the new mask bylaws that require masks wearing in the common areas of condos and apartments. That's new from the previous bylaw that we heard about a couple months ago now. Also changed is that mask wearing inside businesses and office buildings is required, and there has been a fine set at $1,000 in the city of Toronto for each offense. So if they catch you slipping without a mask on, you may be facing this hefty penalty of $1,000. And as we know, Toronto and the GTA finally fully in phase 3 of the reopening plan. So this is just a reminder that yes, we can go to more places, but you really cannot be forgetting a mask anywhere you go anymore. There's really no excuse, unless you're trying to pay $1,000 for not wearing your mask. So those are just some quick updates about what's going on for us over in the province of Ontario and in the city of Toronto, our home. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing, I think is an interesting topic, because it's been a topic of debate for a while, especially amongst the boomer millennial generation, if you will, kind of boomers versus millennials. But I won't say all that. What I will say is that this debate is something that I think is worth getting into, especially as we are seeing more things open up and we're seeing the world around us change every single day. There's something new, there's something different. Also, as you know, we're always value your opinion and your contribution to this discussion. So if you do feel like participating and you want to share your thoughts on what we are discussing today, you know you can do that right in the comment section below, and we will definitely be discussing it later on in the show. So today I want to start off with this question. Are we working less? Now, this question, and some variation of this question is, are we getting lazier, has been studied for a very long time, especially with the focus on how technology might be, quote unquote, making us lazier. Now, for example, in 2018, the University of British Columbia did a study on why society is getting lazier, even though we know the risks of living unhealthy, inactive lifestyles. Now, according to their research findings, they found that it's because our brains are simply built to pick what's easier. So we're going to pick what's easier to eat. We're going to pick the easiest route to get to places. We're just going to pick the easier option, because who's trying to do all of that work anyway? But with the rates of obesity, even just globally, we somewhat know collectively that this is how it's been, and that we're becoming more sedentary, and we need to involve more healthy eating options and more working out, a healthy fitness lifestyle, all of that. All of this we know, we've discussed. But today I don't want to talk about how many calories versus how much cardio we need to be doing or have been doing. I want to look at another way one would be labeled as lazy, quote unquote. Now, work ethic. It seems the conversation around how much work ethic or even endurance the younger generations have compared to older generations is not on the same level. Now, this is just speculation. It's just chit chat that I see in the interwebs and the conversation sphere. Now, this debate is one that I have personally had many times when I'm thinking about how much work culture really has changed, as I've come into the workforce after leaving school, after leaving my parents' home, and now I'm an adult trying to be independent, trying to start a career. I've noticed that work culture is very different and how even people in my generation handle work-life balance. And I found that really having a good balance is what's most important to a lot of people who are in the millennial, even Gen Z, if you will, that's what they're called now, Gen Z generation. And of course, with technology, it's getting easier for us to find different ways to be flexible with how we work, where we work, what we do for work as well. There are some jobs that are being made these days that weren't even an idea or just simply an idea about 5 years ago. For example, a prominent industry that's really booming now is social media management. Who would have thought that, let's say at least 10 years ago, anybody would come out and say that, hi, I'm in charge of a firm that handles different companies' social media. Huh? Like Twitter was only like a year old at that point, so it wasn't where it is now. Who's really doing social media management back then? But now, as I said, there are firms and businesses and even just apps in general created for the main purpose of handling social media management. That's something new, and that's with the rise of technology and the way we are engaging with technology now. It's creating a different industry of work. So we're going to dive into the discussion of whether we are actually getting lazier or working less, or just being more creative with our work culture and how we relate to our work. From looking at the stats of who's starting businesses in Canada, from research from the last 5 to 6 years, to work culture in general and the way we balance life and work and life and family and work and family and just life in general during this time, or how we turn life into work. We are also going to be discussing how things have changed, especially due to the pandemic, in how we look and engage with our work, from working at home to how the government is helping to provide some aid for those who were heavily impacted by the pandemic and stay-at-home orders, how work life may not be what it used to be and may have very well changed for good. I mean, the work week may not look the same after we come out the other side of this pandemic. So I really want to dive into that. And are we truly working less, or have times changed so much that we are starting to accept a new way of working? Now that's our discussion topic for today. If you already have some opinions on that, please sound off in the comments below. We'll be reading those out a little bit later. But I do want to start off just by talking a little bit about like what, traditionally speaking was considered work. For the most part, it's Monday to Friday, a 9-to-5 job. That was a respectable occupation to have, at least for me growing up. I just thought that's normal. You're working Monday to Friday, you're working 9 to 5 in an office building between 4 walls and a cubicle. You're gonna engage with people, you're gonna do whatever work your boss tells you to do, and you're gonna hope you're gonna get that promotion and rise up the corporate ladder onto leadership positions. But work is really changing, and we're seeing that a lot more people are deciding to opt out of the traditional work life or workforce and start their own things. Now, entrepreneurship has really become a popular topic of conversation in recent years, as we're starting to see a lot more small businesses spring up and actually become medium to large size businesses. And we're seeing a lot more people decide to take their careers into their own hands, more freelancing opportunities, more people turning their hobbies into professions, just more self-employment. Now, with the rise of social media, we're also seeing more and more people becoming their own bosses globally, doing what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it, because it's not something that they've seen available already. Now, entrepreneurship is not anything new. We know that already. It's not a new concept. It's the mom and pop shops that we go to, the small businesses that's owned by a family, even the gas station that's owned by one person, though under a franchise. But entrepreneurship is not something new and did not just rise up because of technology, but the way we see entrepreneurship and the way it's being handled is changing. But before we get into that, let's take a look at some of our facts and figures regarding how popular self-employment has been in Canada. Now, according to Stats Canada, a report that they published on a 2018 survey on financing and the growth of small and medium enterprises, as of December 2018, the Canadian economy totaled 1.2 million employer businesses, meaning that there's at least more than one official employee for a business. Now, of this 1.2 million, about 97.9%, totaling at 1.18 million, were small businesses. That's a big percentage, right? And then about 1.9% were medium-sized businesses and 0.2% were large businesses. So this is just understanding like the total of employer businesses that were in Canada as of December 2018. Now, other stats show that between 2012 and 2016, the average number of small and medium enterprises created annually was about 95,940. And the average size number of those businesses that disappeared annually was about 90,120. So on average, 36.7% of SMEs, as we'll call them, were created in the goods producing sector, were able to survive at least 15 years. So what we're hearing is that, yes, a lot of small businesses were started within those 4 years. And of course, a lot did not make it through, but we're seeing that at least on average, 36.7 of those small to medium-sized businesses were able to survive at least 13 years, compared with 31.3% of SMEs created in the service-producing sector. So those who are giving an actual product that folks could buy lasted longer than those providing services. So this just gives us like a general idea of what self-employment looked like within the last decade or so in Canada. Now, in 2015, small businesses contributed about 41.7 to the GDP generated by the private sector, while the contribution of medium-sized businesses was 13.2. Now, what constitutes a small business is anything less than 10 employees, and then medium sizes is about 10 to 50, and then larger is over 100 employees. So small businesses contributed 41.7% to the annual GDP in 2015. Now that is something, okay? A lot of people do not give small businesses their due recognition because we're thinking, oh, it's not these Fortune 500 companies, but there are more small businesses than we tend to realize that are operating and have been operating for a long time and are actually contributing to the GDP. Which is also why our government did put an emphasis on ensuring that small businesses had the help that they needed during this time to make it out onto the other side of things. So we know that medium-sized businesses contributed about 13.2%, and large businesses contributed about 45.1%. Makes sense just because larger businesses have more resources and financial stability. Now, over the 2011-2015 period, SMEs contribution to the GDP was 49.4 on average in the goods producing sector. So, and then compared with 56.1 in the service producing sector. Now, we didn't mention before that service producing businesses didn't last as long generally, but they're still, contributing to the overall GDP of things. So I want you guys to hear these facts, just remembering also that we're discussing whether we're working less. Now, these facts may help to back up the fact that, just because it's a small business doesn't mean that it's any less work, and it's still contributing quite a bit to the annual GDP. It's in the 40s percentile range. For a small business, that's a good contribution to the GDP. Now, more than half of Canadian small businesses are concentrated in 5 major industries, about 12.1% in the retail trade, about 12.3% in the construction, and 12.1% in the professional, scientific, and technical services, i.e. giving legal contracts, dealing with complicated tax returns, that sort of industry, and 9.2% were from other services, and 9.5% of healthcare and social assistance. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of businesses we have in Canada that are usually owned by a self-employed business owner, a small to medium-sized business, mostly in the retail trade and construction industry. Together, these 5 industries account for about 55.4% of all small business jobs. So that's more than half of the small businesses that are working within this industry. And it makes sense. I mean, at least for Toronto, there's constantly construction happening. Everywhere I go, there's construction down the road of our studio right now as we speak. And not all companies are these large, conglomerate corporations. Some of them may be actually small to medium-sized construction companies. And there's a lot of construction going on, so there's a lot of opportunity there for construction companies in Toronto, at least. Now, for retail, with the rise of e-commerce opportunities, it's easier to reach a broader customer base. With technology, social media, it's easier to reach more of a global base than it would have been if you're just working in a small boutique in your own town or something. So with the rise of technology, it's really boosting the retail and e-commerce industry, and you're seeing more and more people go into that industry now. Now, based on data from 2014, we found, as well on Stats Canada, found that 31% of startup owners were between 50 and 64 years old. So we're looking at generationally. Who is really starting their own business compared to other generations? And this might also help you to come up with your own opinion on whether we are actually working less as time goes on. So we got 31% of startup owners from 2014 were between the ages of 50 and 64, 29% between 40 and 49. We have 28% between 30 and 39, and 9% were folks who were less than 30 years old. So I personally fall into that bracket, but that's 6 years ago. So now, in contrast, only 26% of non-startup owners were between 40 and 49 years old. There were 11% between 30 and 39, and 1% less, 1% less than 30 years old. So what this is telling us, this data is telling us, is essentially that there are more folks between the ages of 25 and 39 who are self-employed than they are business owners at non-startup companies. So they are self-employed business owners more in the 25 to 39 age range than there are who are business owners and not. And I mean, experience-wise, they say experience comes with age. So you'll definitely see like older people who are in being business owners for non-startup companies than you probably will see a 25-year-old, unless they, of course, own the company. And so this is what this data reflects. And this was in 2014 as well. So, which means that we're also seeing less of the younger generation essentially staying in the workforce and then wanting to venture into their own self-employment opportunities. We're just going to leave that from there because we're going to get into that side of discussion a little bit later. Now, among business owners under 30 years old, 36% were startups and 64% were non-startups. So this is just generally in those age groups. 36% were working at startups and 64 were non. Now, amongst business owners 30 to 39 years old, 17% were startups, and 40 to 49 years old, 8% were startups, 50 to 64 years old, 5%, and 65 years old and over, 2%. So we're really seeing younger generations really take on this whole startup culture, if you will, and that's fair. I mean, a lot of startups, if you want to call them that, were really with the boom of the technological age, is what I'm going to call it now, because technology is really, it's changing and it's going fast and it's hard to keep up with sometimes. But a lot of the younger generations have really been holding on to that and taking that and running with it to start their own companies. So from this data, what we can conclude for the most part is that most startup owners were older. And that could be for many different factors. It could be because of financial security. You're older, you have more experience, you were able to save money for longer than your younger counterparts. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that those numbers are still very close for owners in the 30 to 40-year-old age range. So we're still seeing a really good population of, I guess you can call them younger generations. Don't find me, that's what we're just gonna call them for now, okay? Who are also taking on these leadership and taking on the independence of being business owners. So the potential for someone my age owning a non-startup is far less than me just starting my own thing and being my own business owner. And that in itself is, it's tantalizing. It sounds good to be like, I'm the CEO of my own business. That's something you want to say. It's got its perks and its props and whatnot, and it feels good to be able to say that at under 25. But now we know starting a business is not easy, and there's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of sacrifice that goes into it. Just knowing starting my magazine about 3 years ago now, even just interacting with other entrepreneurs, you know that sometimes the work-life balance isn't always great, but there is a lot of flexibility, and it does also allow for some people to choose to opt to work part-time because, you know, financial security, the cost of living is really changing, and it's getting a little bit more expensive for the average, you know, new grad to be able to make their way and start saving and thinking of buying a house, you know, all those quote unquote adult things to do. Now, among the core age, which is about 25 to 54-year-olds of workers, the self-employed were more likely to work part-time than those who were employed at 19% versus 11%. And they were more likely to be working part-time by personal reference at 28%. So they made the personal choice that they wanted to work part-time while also starting their own self-employment venture. But now, why is it that folks are opting to own their own business? I mean, as I said, that there are many different reasons why people are choosing to start their own businesses. But for one, Stats Canada found that there are top 4 reasons for self-employment amongst Canadians. They found that 33% wanted the independence, the freedom, and to be their own bosses. So 33% of the people surveyed in 2018 found that they wanted to just be their own bosses, be independent, have the freedom. 15% wanted to go through the self-employment route because of the nature of their job. Their job didn't require 4 walls and a cubicle. It didn't require the employee-employer face-to-face relationship, maybe freelancer or contractor, if you will, working solo. Doesn't need that, so the nature of their job, they just work for themselves. Even some doctors having their private practices, things like that. A dentist having a private practice, it's not necessary that you have to join a hospital to practice. You can start your own thing. 9% wanted to work family balance. This was, according to Stats Canada, the top choice for women, especially with families, who wanted to be able to take care of their family while also having a career. And 8% wanted the flexible hours. So these are the top 4 reasons, according to Stats Canada, of why people were choosing to be self-employed as opposed to being employed. Now, work culture is also changing, and work-life balance is becoming something that folks are really wanting to actually have a balance with, and, you know, as much as you can, 50-50, knowing that this is when work stops and that's it, that's done, and I get to live my life the rest of these hours. You know, the 9 to 5, you cut off at 5, that's it, you're clocked out. Don't talk to me about work after 5. I'm not gonna hear you. You know, you get that last minute email at 4:55 and you're like, should I answer or should I just pretend I don't see it until the clock strikes 5, and then it's not my problem anymore. Now, work culture is definitely changing, but it's also important to note the opportunity for more creative professions now as well, because technology is allowing for more people, I mean, bloggers, influencers. These were things that, you know, when someone said that, oh, I'm a blogger, it's like, oh, for fun, not for an actual job. But now people are actually making real careers, starting businesses off of blogs that they started. More creative professional options now. And because of the nature of those jobs, you're probably working for yourself at the end of the day. Now, growing up, I knew that there were the major professions, there were the major sections of what you could go to school for, and that would almost guarantee you a job once you're out. I knew it was the doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a teacher, and all of the professions that fall within those brackets and within those categories. But now with technology, we're seeing more flexibility in what is considered work. As I said, bloggers, influencers, things like that. That wasn't what was really considered, quote unquote, a real job up until people started making 6 figures for blogging. Now, though we know in Canada the main industries are retail, construction, professional, scientific, and technical services, but even just taking a look at the retail industry just a little closer, there's a lot more of an emphasis on being eco-friendly and conscious of our environment and the role we play in what we're contributing to, you know, global warming and just the general deterioration of our planet, unfortunately. And there are a lot more brands now, fashion especially, or just even retail in general, whose main mission is to provide products that are also eco-friendly. And there are more brands popping up even within Canada that we're seeing, a lot more sustainable brands that we're seeing. And this isn't something that was really like the core. You know, you had your few, but it wasn't really part of the main conversation in the retail world. It wasn't part of the main conversation in general. But now we're seeing more people do that because it wasn't there before. Personally, outside of retail, started my magazine because I didn't see that there was a platform that was providing recognition or even encouragement to dark-skinned women of color. So I decided that I was going to start my own thing. So this is also a reason that, you know, not just being your own boss, but also starting something that isn't already available, finding a niche in the market that hasn't already been, you know, monopolized by a giant conglomerate company in some way. And a lot of these new startup companies that we're seeing are like that, and taking advantage of technology to start up at low cost. You know, you can teach yourself how to build a website. You don't necessarily need a web designer for a basic website. You can teach yourself basic graphic design, video editing, photo editing. People are able to teach themselves these things by a simple Google search. So you don't necessarily need to go for 4 years of university or post-secondary education to receive the training or even just experience for a lot of the new professions that are popping up now. You can just teach yourself at home. And that's another form of flexibility, is that you could just go at your own pace. Now, if someone has an innovative idea, rather than joining the workforce and not doing it, more people are opting to just go for it, you know, taking the leap to be an entrepreneur and be self-employed and just starting it yourself. Now, this sort of flexibility is cited as the main reason that we're seeing more entrepreneurs, is that people want to start their own thing and have their own thing to their name, that they can say like, yes, I built this myself. They want the freedom. They don't want to have a boss that they answer to at their job. You know, it's a job that you love. You have the independence that you can choose your hours. You can just figure it out by yourself. You don't have to talk to anyone else if you don't want to. But it's also the opportunity to create your own work culture that you may not have found anywhere else. So say you're having issues dealing with the 9 to 5 hours and you feel that you can do your job remotely. You can do that. You don't need to be in an office for those 7 hours a day. You can start off at 6 o'clock, take a long lunch break, and then come back at the end of the day to continue your job. You're your own boss. You can do whatever you want. You can create your own culture. And then when you start employing people, then they will follow suit as well. So it's not just this traditional culture that we've created around work. It's whatever people are wanting it to be. Now, this is especially common within the millennial generation. CBC reported research conducted by Nielsen on behalf of human resources software company Ceridian in 2018, and they found that millennials just generally aren't sticking around if they're not feeling fulfilled at a job anymore. Amongst the 1,001 Canadians and 1,000 Americans surveyed, they found that 37% were actively or casually looking for a new job, and 36% say that they would consider a new position if recruited. Now, to employers out there who are like, oh my goodness, what? These numbers mean that all of my millennial hires are gonna jump ship. Not necessarily, but you know, work culture just isn't fitting them. They're not feeling fulfilled in their life. They don't feel that they have to stay in a job just to stay in a job or just to say that they have a job. There's more freedom to explore other options. You don't have to stay at a company for 15 years of your life. Maybe you can do 2 years here. You could do 1 year here. You're gathering experience as well at the same time, figuring out what career opportunities you want for yourself, even figuring out if you want to make them for yourself. So we millennials love to take things into our own hands and not just go with it, you know? Now, Lisa Sterling, who is head of the HR division at Ceridian, says, quote, "The expectations are different than even 10 years ago. Millennials have a desire to do work that is interesting to them, things that give them joy and satisfaction. I think they're more willing to walk away than the generations that came before them." Now, this is, we could say, is mostly due to seeing like their parents' generation or my parents' generation working long hours at a job that they didn't find fulfilling. Now, millennials fall within the 25 to 39 age bracket, and we know about 37% of that are startup owners in Canada. So that gives you a little idea. Now, Lisa Sterling also went on to say that, quote, "The way work is evolving now, it's more about continuing to have an expansion of your knowledge and your experience. It doesn't always mean climbing a ladder." As I mentioned before, they're more inclined to just gather as much experience as possible to really see what it is they enjoy doing the most, what brings them the most joy. So it doesn't mean that you're just going to stay in a company at 15 years just because that was the first company that hired you. It's more, is this company helping me fulfill my desires and my dreams and my goals? And there's more of that. And what's so wrong in that? But some people will see that as being disloyal. It will see it as being flighty, commitment issues, if you will. What do you think that is? What do you think it means when someone is exploring as many options as they can, not necessarily tied down by a job? Does it mean that they have commitment issues, they're disloyal to a company? Or do you think that it means that they're just wanting to experience as much as they can, especially being young and have the energy to do so? And maybe not even having as many responsibilities as well, be able to just explore all the options that are available to them. Now, another reason we're seeing more self-employment in general is because of the nature of the job, with about 15% of folks citing that is the reason for them wanting to be self-employed. Now, remote work is a concept we know a lot of now due to the pandemic and a lot of us working from home and our stay-at-home orders, but it's still, it wasn't something that we were thinking about before. And it's still used, though many businesses are reopening, and some of us are still working from home now. But pre-2020, working from home wasn't really, for an office-based job, you weren't really seeing that on a wide scale. It's mostly with newer companies that you would see that remote work was an option, with the rise of startups, yes. But with older, more established, if you will, companies that have been around for longer, that option wasn't really a thing, because why are you working from home if you could just be in the office, and if anyone needs anything, they could just pop on over to your cubicle or your office, as opposed to having to set up a Zoom meeting. Now, for parents, childcare would be more flexible, which could be combined with the third highest cited reason for self-employment in 2018, where 8% of folks cited wanting a work-family balance as their top reason for being self-employed. Being able to be flexible with your work hours, not having to go into an office for a set amount of time a day, means that maybe you won't have to pay over childcare, which is getting a lot more expensive now, especially in the city of Toronto, hearing from my friends who have kids as well, talking about how much it costs for just daycare a year. Wow. But being more flexible with your time and your schedule may mean that you won't have to put your child into any childcare. You could save that money, invest it back into your business, if you will, or even just save up in general. And that's an option for a lot of people, or just also because folks don't want to be doing the 9 to 5, which really isn't even 9 to 5 anymore. And they want to spend as much time with family, because when your kids are young, you want to have all those memories so you can look back and you can put it into like a speech at a great occasion of theirs and let them know what they were doing when they were 5 years old or anything. People are really valuing that family time, that time that they can balance working and being with their loved ones. Now, of course, with the rise of blogging and influencer-based self-employment, the nature of those jobs doesn't necessarily require, as I said, 4 walls in a cubicle, but wanting more flexible to be able to live your life. Then does it mean more to work than for you? Does it mean we're working less if we want more flexibility in how we are going through our day-to-day job lives? Or are we realizing more that the old work culture or the traditional work culture wasn't necessarily healthy, and it's adding to high levels of stress, which we know doesn't only have its mental repercussions, but also physical too, and can really affect your physical health? We'll be coming back with a break. Stay tuned as you ponder that question. Are we working less, or do we just want more flexibility in our life? So stay tuned. Love to invite you to join our team. We're looking for driven, genuine folks who are willing to work hard as an independent broadcaster. If this sounds like you, come join our team. For more information, email your resume to career@gbkm.fm. That is career, CAREER, @gbkm.fm. It's time to turn your passion into a career. Do you believe you could host an entertaining, engaging, and thoughtful weekly show? Or are you a business person or entrepreneur interested in building a brand for yourself? Can you connect with an audience and have strong social media skills? If so, the GBKM network would love to invite you to join our team. We're looking for driven, genuine folks who are willing to work hard as an independent broadcaster. If this sounds like you, come join our team. For more information, email your resume to career@gbkm.fm. That is career, CAREER, at gbkm.fm. It's time to turn your passion into a career. Hello, welcome back to the Chatt Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, and today we are discussing whether we as a society are working less, or in other words, getting lazier when it comes to work. Now, before we went on a break, we were discussing the many reasons why people are opting for more self-employment. And one of the highest cited reasons is because folks just want to be their own boss. Another reason was for more of a work-family balance, and just in general, a better work-life balance. Now, we know that high stress levels can really affect our health, not just mental, but also physical. But we are now becoming more cognizant of the impacts of working life on our mental health and recognizing when a break is needed and required. Though more businesses are also providing mental health days because we're recognizing that, more people are using their paid time off to deal with their mental health issues. It's not universal just yet. And not all employers offer that option. Now, along with the stigma that is still surrounded by mental health, especially in the workplace, it's very hard for some folks to ask for that time off if they do need to just take care of themselves, take a break, take a breather. It's getting too stressful. Why do you think that we think that wanting to take a break from work means that you just don't want to work, you're lazy, or you're a procrastinator, and that tough it out and keep working, especially when it's to do with our mental health. Taking a break to take care of ourselves is important so that we can become more productive. And this is backed by science. Taking those breaks, taking those breathers is good for productivity in general. You can't power through 7 hours with no breaks. You need a lunch break. You need a coffee break, if you will. You need a water break, a break, just a break in general at some point in the day. You can't go through those days and then expect to be functioning at the end of the week. Now, with the flexible hours of some self-employment opportunities, like freelancing, for example, it can offer the option or the choice for people to take a break when needed. There's no need to request any time off because you're just requesting it from yourself anyway. There's no need to, put in the formal request, citing the reason for it, doing all of that traditional stuff. Self-employed, you have the freedom to be able to take the time off if you need to. It's the flexibility and be able to make your own hours, especially with remote work. Now, to be able to take vacations and take your work with you if need be, you can work anywhere, it doesn't really matter. That is something that's really, enticing to a lot of people, and a lot of self-employed folks, myself included sometimes, feel is the perks of being self-employed is that you can make your own hours. So if I want to wake up at 3:00 in the morning and get some work done, I'm not thinking, they're not paying me for this, because I'm paying me. Now, it's not just for our own health that a lot of people value the flexibility of being self-employed, but also for those who are taking care of their loved ones around them. The flexibility can allow for the time to take off to care for those in your life. For example, being a personal caretaker can be a full-time job at times, and that doesn't really allow for a traditional means of employment to be practical. It's not very practical. However, if you are self-employed and you can work from home and you can pick your hours, and it's not necessary you do the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 gig, that's an option for you too. And that's another reason that a lot of folks are opting for self-employment, to take the time off when you need to care for those you need to care for. All in all, having more flexible work schedules, knowing that work doesn't only have to happen between the hours of 9 to 5, especially of those who have just been, especially for those who that time framing has just been a mere suggestion. I mean, we know for the most part, we're not only working 9 to 5. For example, lawyers are having about 80-hour weeks. I know mathematically speaking, the math doesn't add up. 9 to 5 in a total of Monday to Friday, and you're working a total of 80 hours, you're working more than 9 to 5 every single day, of course. It's almost double that. Even for teachers who we think are probably 9 to 3 or whatever the school hours is. No, it starts before school and continues on after. If teachers have activities that they have to do as well after school, there's also that. There's the preparing, there's the grading, there's all of that, lesson planning, all of that. So we're not really doing the 9 to 5 thing anymore that we think we are in our heads. A lot of us are working more than that anyway. And of course, owning your own business isn't something that it's not like a walk in the park a lot of the time. It does take a lot of time and a lot of effort. Even with the flexible hours, you do find yourself staying up late at night, working through the day sometimes. So even then, it's all work at the end of the day. You still have to put in the hours to get the results as well, whether you're working for someone else or you're working for yourself. But to think that the only job that is recognized as a real job is one that is quote unquote 9 to 5, the stats are saying that that's not necessarily true. Now, so does wanting more flexibility in your hours mean you want to work less? What do you think? I posed this question earlier and I want to see what you guys are thinking about that statement, that whether wanting more flexible hours means you want to work less. Personally, I don't, just knowing from experience that wanting flexible hours probably means that I'm going to be working more than a 9 to 5 I would at a 9 to 5 job, and also because it's the pride in working for yourself as well. You want to do a good job because this is for you. Also, financial security. So the more work you put in, the more results and gains, if you will, you get out of it. Now, this isn't minimizing the plight of some self-employed business owners who may have required or wanted the flexible hours or just wanted to be their own boss, but cannot actually, they actually have to operate within the 9 to 5 business hours. Which, is it time to change those? Can we get rid of the 9 to 5 idea that those are the only business hours? We know that we're not working those anymore on a general scale. Now, for those business owners, for example, shop owners, restaurant owners, you know that you can't always take time off in general, because if you take time off, it means that you're not going to be making money. For service providers as well, time in means that you're making money, as opposed to someone who may own a retail or e-commerce business where you can make money in your sleep because it matters on what someone else on the other side of the world is doing as well. And if they're up and they're spending money for your product, you're making money too, and you're not physically there doing the job. Now, it's understanding that though that too in itself is stressful, because we started talking about how wanting to be self-employed may be to help deal with your mental health issues. Not all jobs allow for that much flexibility. However, there is more leeway than if you have to answer to someone else, because then you got to deal with what they're thinking. But if it's just you answering to you, there's more flexibility in you wanting to take the time to really do what's necessary, is taking care of yourself or taking care of the people you love. Now, also for small business owners, it's also the financial stress that a lot of them are dealing with. And we have seen through this pandemic as well in seeing businesses closing. Now, COVID has had its impact on a lot of things, but for one, it was Canadian small businesses. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, or the CFIB, stated in a new report that 1 in 7 small businesses are at risk of going under because of the pandemic, in addition to the ones that had already closed down. Now, this report came out towards the end of July, so that gives you a little bit of an indication where things are right now in Canada for small business owners. Now, even with the government's help with the stimulus packages and the wage subsidies, there we go, for small businesses and even employees who had lost their job due to COVID, there is still the potential for a lot of these businesses not to be able to bounce back from the pandemic. Now, speaking of this stimulus package, it brings me to an argument that is timely, as it's something that I've been seeing a lot, especially in conversation with some people, is that there's an argument for and against the CERB. Now, the CERB, is for those who had and can prove that they lost their job because of COVID-19, due to the impact of COVID-19. And the government was offering $2,000 every month in installments to those who had signed up for this stimulus package. Now, a lot of people, that is more than they were making anyway from their regular 9 to 5 job. So this is something that's, I just have to stay at home. I'm making $2,000. why will I want to go back to work, especially when it's not safe yet, quote unquote? It's still a little dicey. Yes, in Ontario, we're down to 33 new cases as of yesterday, but we don't know what the future holds. We've heard of these second waves. The second waves has been the shadow looming above us for a while. So folks who are receiving the CERB, some are saying, what's the point of returning back to work when I'm getting more from the government for just staying at home and staying safe? Now, the CFIB also conducted a study that found 27% of small firms reported that some of their laid off staff have refused to work when recalled. And among those who refuse to re-enter the workforce, 62% say they prefer to remain on CERB. So those are the facts for you. But others are also opting to skip work, not just because of the CERB, but because they are more concerned for the health of themselves and their family, with 47% saying that they are worried about their health or their family's health if they are exposed to a virus at work. Mainly service workers, our waitresses working in restaurants as we're opening up a little bit more now. 27% are concerned about their child or family care duties, which was a main reason a lot of people opted for self-employment, as well, as we know. 7% are wary of taking public transportation to get to work because not everybody owns a car. People will have to get onto the subway, and that in itself poses its risks. And 16% see no point in returning to work so soon, since there may not be enough hours or work available for them at this point. Which are pretty valid points, because if not all businesses are at 100% capacity yet, it means that less people are working because there are going to be less customers also allowed in within the spaces due to our regulation. Now, of course, these are unprecedented times, and that has required for a lot of change in a short amount of time. And to expect the same relationship with work as we had before the pandemic, after, and people were receiving their benefits from the government, or people were working from home and saw the flexibility in that and just how much less stress they may be feeling because they're in an environment that makes them feel safe. It seems a little unrealistic to think that now that we've seen this side of the world and seen how work can continue with this change, to think that we're all of a sudden going to just go back to normal and there won't be some type of friction. Now, not just because of the benefits from the government, of course, people are not wanting to go back to work. There are the health reasons and whatnot, and because people are receiving what's considered more livable wages from the government, but also just how we view our work culture now. Things have changed. We're seeing that even just from the data that's provided, that the flexibility really does bring a lot of benefits to a lot of people's lives. You get to spend more time with your family. You get to spend more time even cultivating hobbies, or even turning your hobby into your side hustle and making that your self-employment journey. There's more flexibility now, as we've seen, remote working from home. So thinking about whether you want to go back to what you were doing before, just to continue what you're doing, it's a little tough. And it's understandable. Employers want their employees back working, but who are you going to tell to go back to work if what they were making barely covered their living expenses, versus now when they're getting the extra hand from the governments and the help, and even now as the CERB program is slowly turning into employment insurance as well. Folks are a little hesitant, and it's understandable. You've had this for what? We've been here for about 4 months now. You've gotten used to this way of life now, and then to say all of a sudden, come on, get back to how we were working before, it might be a little tricky to do that. Now with technology alone, we can see that there's so many things that can change and can work. Instead of having that conference table, you can just schedule a Zoom meeting. And if you don't have the premium, that Zoom meeting is going to end in about 40 minutes. So you can go ahead with the rest of your day. And if you don't want to put your camera on, you don't need to let your boss know that you're still in your pajamas at noon. Comfortable lifestyle, flexibility, there's not as much stress to perform, if you will. Because when you're at work, you're not how you are at home. So there are some perks to this. Now, data doesn't reflect the hours that self-employed business owners are putting into their work, of course. And this all this shows us is that people are opting to work for themselves these days, mostly for the independence and the freedom. And also just because work culture is changing, which in itself says something about how people feel about the general workforce. Folks aren't liking how the traditional workforce was before. So let me ask you, in your adult life, when was the last time you did something that you considered a hobby? Not a responsibility, just something that you enjoy doing just for yourself. In a 2019 leisure poll sponsored by Van Hoyt, they found that 69% of 1,500 Canadians polled and cited that work-life balance or health benefits was a motivation for them to be keeping up a hobby. That they felt that they needed to keep up a hobby just so that they could feel some balance with work life. It was a way to, get away from that. And 72% said that they do theirs to relax from their busy day-to-day life. So it's not that people are really necessarily getting rid of their hobbies these days. It's that they're recognizing that there needs to be more of a balance with work life and crafting the time to do that. So all of this is just essentially to say that work culture really is changing. We're seeing a difference in how even these startup companies that we're seeing more of them spring up, and we're seeing that, they have a ping pong table in the middle of their lobby. They have all of these perks. They have mental health days. They have paid time off. They have vacation days as well. We're seeing the way that work is changing. There's more opportunity for remote work. There's even more opportunities to start a side business that turns into your full-time job. Technology is allowing us to change the way we see work. So why are we still working within Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and thinking that those are regular functioning hours for most people? Now, as we've opened this discussion up here today, I'm just going to read off some of our comments. Here we have one person saying that financial problems are scaring people for more self-business. Now, that does make sense. It is a stress having the financial burden of owning your own business. But a lot of people are seeing that is outweighed by the fact that there's more flexibility. And if you're doing it part-time, you're working part-time, but you're working on your business the other half of the time, you have the opportunity to have that extra income on the side while also still doing something that is fulfilling for you. And as we said in our previous data, that more millennials are looking for jobs that are fulfilling to them, that they find joy in, that they enjoy, and are not just looking for a job to have a job. So, all over the world, there's a lot of financial insecurity. Even just in Canada, we had to increase the minimum wage because we recognized that the minimum wage that we had before did not match how much it cost to actually live in Ontario and live in Toronto as well. So we saw that there was that increase in the minimum wage because the government recognized that, not everyone's able to pay their rent every month. Not everybody is able to even have food on the table every single night. Maybe we're not paying, the mass majority enough to live comfortably or even just live within their city or within the province. And so at least here in Canada, we have a government that recognizes that, it is the government's duty essentially to help citizens as much and residents as much as possible to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. We saw it with the stimulus package where our government and our prime minister said, please stay home. Basically saying we will pay you to stay home so that we can all stay healthy. And now look at it. We're 4 months on the other side and we're seeing some really good numbers, and we're seeing that life is slowly starting to return to, or let me say, life is slowly evolving to become more of our new normal with more things to do, more things that are open, and we're not required to just stay in our house as much anymore. But saying that is that we know that I was listening to Michelle Obama's podcast that she recently released, and the first episode, she is speaking with her husband, Barack Obama, about how when they were growing up, Michelle Obama's father was able to support the family of 4 on his city job salary. But nowadays, that's highly unlikely. We're seeing more 2-income households nowadays. You're seeing more families that, have both parents or guardians working because the cost of living is going up. And so financial insecurity and instability is one thing that might deter people from self-employment, but we're seeing that that's not the main reason. In fact, income was second to last on the list of top 10 reasons why, according to Stats Canada, folks were opting for self-employment. It wasn't even about the money. It was mostly about the work-life balance. So does it really mean that we are choosing to work less? Personally, to answer this question, I don't think we're working less. I really don't. I'm seeing a lot more people becoming more independent in what they're wanting to do with their lives career-wise. I think it's more about how we're recognizing that work doesn't always have to be your life, and that there's more to life than just working a 9-to-5 job Monday to Friday, that there's other ways we can fit in life within the week that isn't just surrounded about those 7 hours you are doing what is listed on your job description. It's more that you can do. People choosing to do hobbies so that they can find that balance. Our self-employed brothers and sisters who are opting for self-employment so that they can have that balance, so that they can, barbecue with their family on the weekend, so that they can take their kids to soccer practice at the end of the day, so that they could watch their kids grow up, so that they can be with their family, so they can take care of their loved ones. So many reasons that have nothing to really do with the finances of it, and more to do with how we are handling work, what our relationship is with work now. And we're really seeing that shift, especially with, the younger generations coming up and just the kind of jobs that we're seeing now. As I mentioned earlier in the show, social media management was not the big job it is now. Like, that is an actual paid position that people can make a living off of. 5 years ago, would you have ever thought that someone could say that they're making almost 6 figures for being a social media manager? Probably not. That would have been a dream. And now people are living that dream. And it's because there are folks who are choosing to start doing their own thing, going against the status quo, thinking outside the box, these cliches that you were taught growing up, saying that this is what makes you a well-rounded critical thinker. Folks are really starting to do that when it comes to their careers, because it's not anymore that there's only one way to be successful in life, where it's you go to school and then you get a job. We're finding that a lot of people don't even need to have that higher education to teach themselves the necessary skills it takes to be more independent and self-serving as well. And so with that, we conclude today's show. And for the question, are we working less? No. According to the data, we're just working smart and wanting more of a balance in life. Now, with that, I leave you. That little tidbit, I leave you. And concluding today's show, as always, it was so nice chatting with you. And you can always keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. As I mentioned, you can listen live 24/7 at www.gbkm.fm. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV. You can follow us on Insta at GBKMFM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. You can follow me, your host, Elizabeth Aloidi, on Twitter and Instagram at TIS_Liz_O. And I thank you for joining me on the Chatt Up Show. I cannot wait to chat it up with you next week at the same time, same place. Chat you then. Do you believe you could host an entertaining, engaging, and thoughtful weekly show? Or are you a business person or entrepreneur interested in building a brand for yourself? Can you connect with an audience and have strong social media skills? If so, the GBKM network would love to invite you to join our team. We're looking for driven, genuine folks who are willing to work hard as an independent broadcaster. If this sounds like you, come join our team. For more information, email your resume to career@gbkm.fm. That is career, CAREER, at gbkm.fm. It's time to turn your passion into a career. Do you believe you could host an